Deep in the unexplored depths of a cave, a diver discovered a body. What sent a chill down his spine was the sight of another figure floating not far away. As he slowly approached, the figure suddenly lunged at him. Caught completely off guard, the diver was paralyzed with extreme panic. This terrifying encounter is the focal point of today's story, the cave diving tragedy in Spain. The incident took place off the Cap Norfeu coast in the autonomous community of Catalonia, Spain. The entrance to the cave is hidden 8 to 10 meters underwater. The first 45 meters consist of a gentle, officially mapped passage open to the public. With its crystal clear water and an abundance of lobsters in the 20 to 30 meter section, it is affectionately known by local divers as the Lobster Cave, a highly popular spot for recreational diving. However, it is crucial to note that the area beyond the 45-meter mark has never been officially surveyed or explored by humans. On July 19, 2014, the coastal weather was bright and sunny, with calm seas, perfect conditions for a recreational dive. At 10 a.m., Ricard Lopez, Dionisio Martinez, and Javier Montaner finished their equipment checks and entered the water, leaving a fourth companion on the boat as backup support for any emergencies. Notably, none of the three divers possessed specialized cave diving certifications. They only held basic open water licenses. Venturing into this cave was the equivalent of swimming into the deep end right after learning the breaststroke. The trio smoothly navigated the cave's sightseeing area. The passage was wide and forgiving, its walls adorned with beautiful textures and stalactites carved by seawater erosion. Swimming slowly along the rocks in the crystal clear water, they reached the safety zone at a depth of 30 meters, the absolute boundary for recreational diving. 12 meters ahead lay a sharp right-angle turn at the 42-meter mark. Beyond that turn was completely uncharted territory. At this point, Javier used hand signals to clearly inform Ricard and Dionisio that he refused to go any further. He communicated that he would wait in the 30-meter safety zone for exactly 20 minutes. If they didn't return by then, he would head back to the surface. Ricard and Dionisio confidently flashed Javier an OK sign and pushed forward, rounding the corner at 42 meters and venturing into the unknown. Almost immediately, the movement of their bodies and fins stirred up the thick layer of silt on the cave floor. In a mere dozen seconds, their vision was completely swallowed by a milky, impenetrable cloud of sediment. Visibility dropped to absolute zero. They couldn't even see their own hands, let alone the cave walls or each other. The sudden blindness threw both men into a sheer panic. Their breathing rates skyrocketed, turning from steady and rhythmic to rapid and chaotic, draining their air cylinders much faster than anticipated. To make matters worse, the passage drastically narrowed from several meters across to less than a meter, choking down to just 80 centimeters at its tightest point, barely enough for one person to squeeze through sideways. The two divers darted around blindly. A continuous safety guideline should have been their lifeline, but they hadn't laid one down, likely completely lacking the knowledge of its vital importance in cave diving. Back in the safety zone, Javier's 20-minute timer ran out. He saw no sign of his friends, only a billowing cloud of silt rising in the distance. Realizing they were in grave danger and knowing he lacked both the specialized training and equipment to mount a cave rescue, he understood that going after them would only result in his own death. Making the agonizing decision to turn back, Javier surfaced, boarded the boat, and immediately called emergency services. The local civil guard quickly transferred the situation to the Special Group of Underwater Activities, a unit dedicated to specialized underwater rescue. Meanwhile, deep inside the cave, Ricard and Dionisio were consumed by total despair. Swimming blind in the pitch black, they continuously slammed into jagged limestone walls, tearing multiple holes in their wetsuits. In a frantic struggle, they pushed with all their might and managed to squeeze through the suffocating 80-centimeter rock crevice. Just as they believed they were about to drown, they made a miraculous discovery. The narrow passage opened into a massive underwater cavern, and above them was an air bell. Exhausting their last ounces of strength, the two men broke the surface, desperately ripping off their masks to gulp down the air. This chamber measured 7.2 meters long, 4.1 meters wide, and averaged 1.2 meters in height, holding roughly 35 cubic meters of air. Under normal breathing conditions, this volume could sustain two adults for over 24 hours. At that moment, they believed they had found a safe haven, temporarily escaping the jaws of death. They even used an underwater camera to take a selfie, documenting what they thought was their incredible luck. However, they completely overlooked the chamber's deadliest characteristic. It was entirely sealed off from the outside world. There was zero air circulation. In such a confined space, every breath they took consumed oxygen and replaced it with carbon dioxide. The lethal threat of CO2 accumulation acts far faster and is far more insidious than the risk of simply running out of oxygen. As they breathed, the CO2 concentration steadily climbed. Ricard, who was 63 years old, was still reeling from the panic of the narrow passage. His rapid breathing caused the CO2 in his bloodstream to spike drastically. Shortly after entering the chamber, the atmospheric CO2 levels crossed the fatal 7% threshold. Ricard suddenly suffered full-body convulsions, completely lost consciousness, and began slipping beneath the water. Dionisio immediately hauled him back up into the air pocket. But moments later, Ricard sank again, this time much faster. Dionisio struggled mightily to drag him back to the surface, but the freezing water, his own deteriorating physical state, and the dead weight of a grown man fully outfitted in heavy diving gear proved impossible to sustain. Simultaneously, the GS rescue team arrived. After finalizing their dive plan, they plunged into the cave. Their primary objective was to lay down a safety guideline through the completely silted-out water. The divers inched forward along the walls, marking a return path. However, upon reaching the 42-meter turn, they discovered the silt was still fully suspended. With zero visibility, they couldn't determine the layout of the cave ahead. Pushing blindly into the bottleneck would mean walking into the exact same death trap. To avoid further loss of life, the rescue team was forced to abort the mission and follow their line back to the surface. The next morning, after the silt had settled overnight, visibility improved to about 6 meters. With elite cave rescue divers fully assembled and support units on standby, the team descended again at 8 a.m. Following the guideline laid the previous day, they navigated the now visible passage with significantly increased speed. About an hour later, they squeezed through the tight crevice and surfaced in the underground lake at the end of the cave. There, they found the sealed air chamber, Dionisio huddled against the rock wall, and Ricard's lifeless body floating nearby. To conserve oxygen and limit his CO2 output, Dionisio had deliberately slowed his breathing and curled into a motionless ball against the wall, trying to minimize his contact with the freezing water to stave off severe hypothermia. For over 24 hours, he had endured extreme dehydration, freezing temperatures, the agonizing mental torture of floating beside his dead best friend, and the creeping poison of hypercapnia. The prolonged exposure to the toxic air had caused Dionisio to suffer severe delirium and vivid hallucinations. When the rescuers finally broke the surface, Dionisio reacted with sheer terror and aggression. He absolutely refused to leave the chamber and even physically attacked the rescue divers, completely incapable of cooperating. Fearing that Dionisio might thrash around and drown in the freezing lake, the GES team immediately suspended the forced extraction. They contacted Surface Command, who urgently flew in a trusted friend of Dionisio's, who also happened to hold professional diving certifications. The friend dove into the chamber, gently talked to Dionisio, and finally managed to calm him down enough to cooperate. At 3:42 p.m., Dionisio was safely brought to the surface and rushed straight to the ICU. The following day, rescuers returned to recover Ricard's body. The official autopsy report concluded that Ricard died of acute hypercapnia, completely ruling out drowning or decompression sickness. Furthermore, the authorities released a statement to unequivocally shut down malicious public rumors accusing Dionisio of leaving his friend to die. Dive computer logs verified that Dionisio had made 2 distinct attempts to drag Ricard back to the surface. The sheer volume of the air chamber also proved there was no objective reason for the men to fight over air, and absolutely zero evidence suggested any foul play. To this day, Dionisio carries the heavy burden of profound grief and regret over the loss of his friend. In that dark, hopeless cavern, he gave everything he had to save him. He has chosen not to engage with the speculation or rumors, asking only to be left in peace out of respect for Ricard's family and his own healing.